My brother stole my clients. After I built the business from scratch, so I exposed him publicly and secured everything he tried to take. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I built my consulting business from nothing. It started in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment where the walls were thin enough to hear my neighbors argue through the night. My desk was a repurposed kitchen table. My laptop barely held a charge, and my office chair was just a dining chair with a cushion I stole from the couch. Every night, I worked until my vision blurred. Spreadsheets, proposals, client calls that stretched past midnight. I didn't have much, but I had ambition. And for a while, that was enough. Then came Ryan, my older brother. He was everything I wasn't. Smooth-talking, confident, and magnetic in any room. When he saw how hard I was working, he said, "Man, you've got something special here. Let me help you take it to the next level." I wanted to believe him. After all, he was my brother, the guy I used to share a bunk bed with, the one who'd always promised we'd make something of ourselves. At first, his help seemed like a blessing. Ryan had connections, people who could open doors I couldn't even knock on. He started joining my client meetings, charming everyone effortlessly. I handled the strategy, he handled the schmoozing, and it worked. Clients doubled. Money started coming in. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something real. Not just for me, but for us. But then, subtle cracks began to show. During meetings, I noticed Ryan saying things like, "I told my brother we should try that approach," when the idea had been mine. Or he'd casually mention his company to new clients, like I was just part of his team. It felt off. Small things, easy to brush aside, but something deep inside me stirred. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. We were brothers. We were winning. And I had no idea that the same trust fueling our success would soon destroy everything I built. The more success we had, the more Ryan's presence grew, and mine quietly faded into the background. It started small. He'd take the lead on calls, even when I was the one who knew the client's needs inside out. He'd crack a joke, charm them, and end the conversation with, "We'll make it happen. Right, bro?" As if he were the one steering the ship. I'd laugh it off, tell myself it didn't matter who got the spotlight as long as the business thrived. But deep down, I started to feel replaced. One night, I found Ryan sitting at my desk, going through client files. "Just reviewing the numbers," he said, flashing that easy smile. "You've been overworked lately. Thought I'd lighten the load." His tone was calm, reassuring, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. When I asked about a new deal he'd been handling, he said, "Don't worry about it, man. I've got it under control." That should have been a red flag. Instead, I took it as loyalty. Weeks turned into months. Our revenue skyrocketed, but so did Ryan's ego. He began attending networking events without me, telling people he was the founder. One client even congratulated him on his vision. I laughed it off awkwardly at first, but the joke started to wear thin. Every time I confronted him, he'd brush it aside with that same patronizing tone. "Relax, dude," he'd say, half grinning. "We're a team. Who cares who gets the credit?" Maybe I should have cared. Maybe that was my mistake, trusting that family means protection, not competition. But I didn't want to believe Ryan could ever betray me. Not him. Not after everything we'd been through. Still, a quiet unease began to settle in my gut. That faint, familiar warning that something wasn't right. I just didn't know how bad it would get. It wasn't long before the energy between us shifted completely. Ryan no longer acted like a partner. He acted like a boss. He started holding meetings without telling me, signing off on deals I hadn't reviewed, even hiring a new assistant, someone I'd never met. When I confronted him about it, he just smiled that disarming smile and said, "Relax, man. I'm streamlining things. You focus on the big picture." The big picture. That phrase started haunting me, because the big picture was my company, my blood, my sleepless nights, my everything, and he was slowly painting me out of it. One Friday night, I stayed late to catch up on invoices. When I opened the company email, I saw a message from a client I personally brought in months ago. It read, "Hey Ryan, great work on the campaign. Glad we chose to work with your firm instead of your brother's. Let's discuss expanding our contract." I stared at the screen, reading that line over and over. Your firm instead of your brother's. My heart sank. My hands started shaking. He'd been running side deals, using our shared resources, my systems, my brand, and funneling the clients under his own name. When I brought it up the next morning, Ryan didn't even flinch. "Look," he said coolly, leaning back in his chair. You wouldn't have landed half those clients without me. Don't act like I'm stealing something that isn't already ours.
Ours?
I snapped.
You're using my business name, my contracts. You're lying to clients.
He stood up slowly, towering over me, that smug grin never fading.
You're overreacting. I'm just doing what needs to be done. Don't get emotional about it.
Emotional. That word cut deeper than he knew. Because the truth was, I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. I'd built this business on trust and loyalty, and my own brother was dismantling it piece by piece. Still, I didn't walk away. Not yet. I told myself I could fix it, that maybe this was just a phase. But deep down, I knew something had already
broken.
After that confrontation, things between us were never the same. Ryan didn't yell or argue. He just went cold. He started locking me out of decisions, avoiding conversations, and treating me like an outsider in my own company. He'd schedule meetings during times he knew I was unavailable. He changed passwords for security reasons. And somehow, I was always the last to know about new projects. When I asked about it, he'd sigh, pretending to be exhausted. Man, you really need to learn to trust me, he'd say, rubbing his temples dramatically. You act like I'm out to get you. I wanted to scream, you are. But every time I looked at him, my own brother, I hesitated. I remembered the years we spent sharing cheap takeout, brainstorming ideas, celebrating tiny wins. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe success had just made both of us different. Then, one morning, I walked into the office and noticed my name was missing from the company website's About Us section. Just gone. Replaced by a new title under Ryan's picture, Founder and CEO. I froze. My throat went dry. I scrolled through the rest of the page. Every project, every client testimonial, all credited to him. My name wasn't mentioned once. When I stormed into his office, he didn't even look surprised. Oh, that, he said casually, spinning his chair. It's just branding. Clients respond better to a single face leading the company.
My company,
I shot back, voice shaking. He smirked. Your company? Come on, bro. Don't make this awkward. You wouldn't have gotten this far without me. That was the first time I saw it. Not just arrogance, but ownership in his eyes. He wasn't helping me anymore. He was replacing me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen. The company I built from scratch, every document, every logo, every plan, now felt like it belonged to someone else. And the scariest part, I realized, I had no idea how deep his manipulation really went. The next few weeks were chaos disguised as progress. From the outside, the business looked unstoppable. New clients, new offices, sleek branding that screamed success. But behind the scenes, I was fighting to stay relevant in something I had created. Ryan's charm had turned venomous. He'd talk over me in meetings, correct me in front of staff, and always with that infuriating grin that said, I'm in control now. One afternoon, during a client presentation, I suggested a strategy I'd spent weeks developing. Ryan cut me off mid-sentence. Actually, he said, voice smooth and confident, we've already pivoted from that approach. I handled it personally. The client nodded, impressed. I sat there, jaw clenched, watching him rewrite reality in real time, and everyone believed him. Later that night, I confronted him again.
Why are you undermining me in front of clients? You're making me look incompetent.
He shrugged, pouring himself a drink. You're too sensitive, man. This isn't personal. I'm just doing what's best for the business. The business? I said bitterly. You mean my business. He took a slow sip, smirking. See, that's the problem. You still think this is about you. That line hit me like a gut punch. After that night, everything started falling apart faster than I could process. I discovered he'd opened a separate bank account for overflow funds. Our accountant had suddenly quit, replaced by someone Ryan trusted. And when I asked to see the financials, he told me they were under review. I barely slept. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell I let it get this far. This wasn't just business. This was betrayal wearing a family face. And as much as I didn't want to believe it, Ryan wasn't just cutting me out. He was preparing to erase me entirely. The breaking point came one sleepless night, around 2 a.m. I was sitting in the office alone, scrolling through old contracts, trying to piece together what went wrong. That's when I noticed something strange. A client invoice I didn't recognize. Same logo, same project details, but a different bank account number. My pulse spiked. I dug deeper, opening file after file, and it all started unraveling. Multiple clients, same pattern. Funds redirected to a new account under Ryan's name. Not just a few $1,000s, hundreds of thousands. My chest tightened. The air felt heavy, like the room itself was closing in on me. Every late night, every sacrifice, every deal I'd fought tooth and nail to win, he'd been siphoning it all behind my back. The next morning, I confronted him. My voice shook, but my anger cut through every word. Ryan, I know what you've been doing. He didn't even deny it. He leaned back, smiling like I'd just caught him playing a harmless prank. Wow, took you long enough, he said casually. You're stealing from me, from our clients. He chuckled, slow and condescending. Stealing? No, I'm optimizing. You're too emotional to run this place. Someone had to step up. My hands curled into fists. Step up? You've hijacked everything I built. He stood, calm and measured, walking toward me like he was addressing an employee. You're welcome to leave any time, little brother. The business will survive just fine without you. That's when it hit me. This wasn't impulsive. It was planned. Every favor, every branding change, every time he asked me to trust him, it had all been part of the setup. I left that office shaking, numb and hollow. For the first time, I realized this wasn't about business anymore. It was personal, and Ryan had already won the first round. But something inside me snapped that night. I wasn't going to walk away quietly, not this time. The morning after our confrontation, I walked into the office and felt every pair of eyes on me. The silence was suffocating. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Keyboards paused mid-click. Something was off, and I could feel it in my gut. When I reached my desk, my company email was locked. My keycard didn't work. The security guard, who'd known me for years, looked away when I asked to be let in. A few minutes later, Ryan emerged from his office, immaculate as ever, adjusting his cufflinks like he'd been waiting for this moment. Oh, he said, feigning surprise. You're here. I was going to call you later.
What the hell is going on?
I demanded. He sighed dramatically.
You're being overly emotional again. Look, the board, which I now manage by the way, decided it's best for you to take a step back. We're restructuring. You're no longer a good fit.
I laughed. That desperate, shaky kind of laugh you give when reality hasn't fully hit yet. You can't fire me from my own company. Ryan tilted his head. Your company. Check the paperwork, little brother. You signed the partnership agreement. You gave me authority to act on behalf of the business. I just acted. My blood went cold. I remembered that document, the one he'd pushed in front of me months ago, claiming it was just to simplify legalities. I hadn't read every page. I'd trusted him. Don't take it personally, he said, voice smooth as ice. You're creative, but not a leader. This company needs direction. He patted my shoulder on the way out. Go rest. You look tired. I stood there, motionless, as he disappeared down the hallway, my hallway, while the employees who used to look up to me now avoided my gaze. That was the day I lost everything. Or at least, it looked that way on the surface, because what Ryan didn't know was that I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The following weeks felt like drowning in slow motion. I'd wake up every morning and stare at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how my own brother had stripped everything from me. My company, my income, my identity. The silence in my apartment was unbearable. No phone calls, no meetings, just the echo of betrayal bouncing around in my head. Friends reached out at first, but most drifted away once they realized how deep the mess went. I couldn't blame them. Ryan had made sure to control the narrative. According to him, I'd burned out, and he'd graciously taken over to save the company. The worst part? People believed him. One night, I met with an old client, one of the few who still trusted me. We sat in a dim corner of a coffee shop, and he slid his phone across the table. You should see this, he said quietly. On the screen was Ryan, giving a keynote speech at a conference. The headline read, Ryan Parker, the visionary behind a multi-million-dollar consulting empire. I stared at the photo. His smile, the arrogance in his posture, the way he used my story as his brand. Every word felt like a punch to the gut.
He's saying he built it from scratch,
the client said softly. My chest tightened. That was my story. My late nights, my sacrifices, my grind. That's when something inside me shifted. The grief turned into resolve. I realized I couldn't keep wallowing while he profited from my silence. If Ryan had rewritten history, then it was time for me to write it back, one line at a time. I didn't have the company anymore, But I still had my mind, my skills, my proof, and I was done being the quiet brother in the background. Ryan thought he buried me. He didn't realize I was already starting to dig my way out. I spent the next few weeks living like a ghost, quiet, invisible, but watching everything. Ryan thought I was gone for good, licking my wounds somewhere, but he underestimated how much I'd learned from building that company in the first place. I didn't need his stage to make my move. I just needed information. I started small. I reached out to a few clients I trusted, the ones who'd seen my work firsthand, the ones who knew I was the real deal. Most were hesitant at first, afraid to get caught in the middle, but one conversation turned the tide. "Ryan's been cutting corners," one client admitted. "He promised results and then vanished after the deal closed. His team's been a disaster." That was my in. Ryan had built his empire on my foundation, but without me holding it up, the cracks were showing. I started compiling everything: contracts, messages, emails, proof of his double dealings, and forged invoices. It was all there, sitting in the digital shadows he thought I couldn't reach. At night, I worked on a plan, a quiet, strategic one, not to just expose him, but to take back everything. I consulted a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. After a long pause, she said,
"If what you're saying is true, we can bury him, legally."
It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, and maybe a little bit of reclaiming the dignity he'd stolen from me. Every click, every screenshot, every document I archived felt like loading ammunition. The more I dug, the more I saw how far Ryan had gone. Hidden shell accounts, falsified signatures, client kickbacks. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd committed fraud. By the end of that month, I had a folder on my desktop labeled Truth, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I knew exactly how it was going to end. The day I decided to expose Ryan, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt inevitable, like gravity, slow, heavy, and unstoppable. I spent the morning double-checking every file, every timestamp, every email chain. My lawyer helped me craft a report detailing how Ryan had siphoned funds, forged documents, and defrauded clients. Together, we compiled a 70-page dossier, airtight, factual, impossible to spin. Then, with a single click, it went out to our biggest clients, the financial regulator, and the local business journal. The fallout began within hours. My phone lit up like fireworks, first from old colleagues, then reporters. One text from an ex-client stood out.
"Holy hell, man. You really did it. They're all talking about him."
By afternoon, the story was everywhere. Local CEO under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Ryan's smiling face was plastered on every headline, now framed by scandal instead of success. When I saw the first clip on TV, I felt nothing, just quiet. Not satisfaction, not glee, just the kind of stillness that comes after a long storm. That evening, Ryan called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "You think you've won?" he spat. His voice was shaking, but he tried to sound calm.
"You've ruined everything. You ruined me."
I exhaled slowly.
"No, Ryan. You ruined yourself. I just showed everyone who you really are."
He was silent for a long moment, then hissed, "You'll regret this." The line went dead. For the first time in months, I looked around my small apartment and felt peace. The war was no longer in my head. It was out in the open, and the truth, the one he'd buried under lies, was finally breathing again. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished. Because people like Ryan don't just fall quietly. They drag others down with them. And I had a feeling he wasn't done trying. The news spread faster than I could process. Within a week, Ryan's empire collapsed like a house of cards. Clients pulled their contracts, investors demanded refunds, and the government froze his business accounts. Every door that once opened for him slammed shut. I thought I'd feel vindicated, maybe even happy, but watching it unfold felt hollow. This was my brother, after all. The same kid who once shared his last slice of pizza with me when we had nothing. Now, he was the face of corporate betrayal, and I was the one who'd pulled the trigger. A few days later, I got a call from Mom. I hadn't heard her voice in months.
"Why would you do this to your brother?"
she cried.
"He's family, for God's sake."
I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly.
"Mom, he stole from me. He lied. He made mistakes," she interrupted. "You could have forgiven him. You didn't have to destroy him."
I wanted to scream that he destroyed me first, that I'd lost everything because I trusted him. But instead, I just whispered.
You never really saw what he did to me, did you?
She didn't respond, just quiet sobbing before the line went dead. It hit me then. Justice comes with collateral damage.
My family saw me as the villain now, the ungrateful brother who humiliated Ryan in public. He'd manipulated them so deeply that even after his downfall, they pitied him. But I didn't.
Fight back. I didn't explain. The truth was already out there, and that was enough. That night, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city skyline. For years, I dreamed of this view from a penthouse office. Now, I saw it through cracked glass, humbler but clearer. Ryan's fall had freed me from him, but it also left a question I couldn't escape. What comes after revenge? Because once you burn the bridge, all that's left is the smoke. It's been almost a year since Ryan's empire crumbled, and life looks nothing like it did before. Smaller, quieter, but somehow more real. I started over from scratch again. No partners, no grand office, no fancy suits. Just me, my laptop, and the same drive I had in that tiny apartment years ago. Only this time, I'm building differently. I don't chase growth. I chase integrity. I don't work to prove myself anymore. I work to find peace. Every now and then, I still hear about Ryan. He took a plea deal. Most of his assets were liquidated to repay the clients he defrauded. Last I heard, he was bartending in a small town up north. I don't hate him. Not anymore. Hate is heavy, and I carried it long enough. A few months back, he actually reached out. A single text. I messed up. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I know. That was all. No anger, no forgiveness speech. Just closure. People ask if I'd ever work with family again. I tell them no. Not because I don't believe in family, but because trust, once shattered, never rebuilds the same way. It becomes something else. Quieter, cautious, but stronger when placed in the right hands. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment when he first said, "Let me help you." I wish I'd known what was coming, but maybe that's the point. You can't see betrayal until it's behind you. Now, as I look around my new workspace, smaller, simpler, but mine, I realize something. Ryan may have stolen my company, but he couldn't steal my resilience. He took everything that could be taken, except the one thing he never understood. I don't build for power. I build for peace. And this time, no one's taking that away from me.